Rebecca Torres stood outside the glass tower that housed Hoffman Industries, trying to calm the nervous flutter in her stomach. At 24, fresh out of business school with a mountain of student debt and exactly 3 professional outfits to her name, this interview meant everything. She had spent the last week preparing, researching the company, until she could recite their mission statement in her sleep. The morning had started perfectly. She had pressed her navy blue suit the night before, polished her only pair of professional heels until they gleamed, and even treated herself to a decent breakfast, instead of her usual instant coffee and toast. The bus ride into downtown Seattle was smooth. The sun was shining, and Rebecca felt, for the first time in months, like things might actually work out. Then she saw the accident. The elderly woman had stumbled off the curb at the intersection. 3 blocks from Hoffman Industries, her groceries scattering across the wet pavement from an earlier morning rain. She went down hard, her cry of pain cutting through the ambient noise of the city. People walked past, some glancing over their shoulders, but continuing on their way. Rebecca had checked her watch. 20 minutes until her interview. Plenty of time. But when she knelt beside the woman, she realized it was worse than she thought. Now blood seeped from a gash on the woman's shin. Her ankle was already swelling, and she was shaking. Rebecca called 911, but the operator said it would be 15 minutes. The woman, whose name was Dorothy, kept apologizing, kept trying to get up despite the obvious pain. That's when Rebecca made the decision. She couldn't leave Dorothy sitting on the cold, wet ground. Without thinking twice, she slipped off her heels and placed them carefully on the sidewalk beside her purse. Then she removed her blazer, folding it into a makeshift cushion for Dorothy's head. "I'm going to help you to that bench," Rebecca said gently, sliding her arm under the older woman's shoulders. Dorothy was heavier than she looked. The 10 feet to the bus stop bench felt like a mile. Rebecca's stockinged feet got soaked immediately, the gritty pavement cutting into her soles. But she got Dorothy seated, elevated her injured leg, and used tissues from her purse to apply pressure to the wound. By the time the ambulance arrived, Rebecca had 5 minutes to make it to her interview. She turned to grab her shoes, but they were gone. Her blazer was still cushioning Dorothy's head in the ambulance, and her heels had vanished. Probably snatched by some opportunistic passerby while she was focused on helping. Rebecca stood on the sidewalk in her stockings, her crisp white blouse now spotted with blood, her hair falling out of its careful twist, and made a choice. She could go home, call to reschedule, and probably lose her shot at this job. Or she could go in as she was and at least try. She chose to try. Now, standing in front of the gleaming building, she felt her courage wavering. The lobby was visible. Through the glass walls, all marble floors and expensive furniture, she looked down at her bare feet, the stockings already torn at the toes, and took a deep breath. The security guard's eyes widened when she entered. "Miss, are you lost?" "No, sir. I have an interview with Mr. Hoffman at 9 o'clock. Rebecca Torres." He checked his tablet, clearly skeptical, but her name was there. 32nd floor. Elevators are on your right. The ride up was torture. Rebecca caught sight of herself in the mirrored walls and wanted to cry. She looked like she had been in a fight. Her hair was a mess, her shirt was stained, and her bare feet looked absurd against the polished floor. She tried to smooth her hair, but it was hopeless. The 32nd floor was even more intimidating than the lobby. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Seattle, and everything was decorated in shades of white and chrome. The receptionist, a woman in her 50s with perfectly coiffed silver hair and a designer dress, looked up when Rebecca approached. Her expression went from professional welcome to barely concealed shock in less than a second. "I'm here for my 9 o'clock interview with Mr. Rue Hoffman," Rebecca said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. Rebecca Torres, the receptionist, whose nameplate read Janet Phillips, seemed frozen. "I'll let him know you're here. Please have a seat." Rebecca caught Janet's eyes, darting to her feet, then quickly away. She heard Janet's whispered phone call, though she couldn't make out the words. 2 other people in the waiting area, both impeccably dressed and probably here for interviews too, stared at her with expressions ranging from confusion to disdain. She wanted to explain, but what would she say? That she had given away her shoes to help a stranger? It sounded ridiculous even in her own head. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 5 minutes. A door opened, and a man stepped out. Daniel Hoffman was younger than Rebecca expected for a CEO, maybe 40, with dark hair graying at the temples and sharp brown eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit and an expression of polite curiosity. "Miss Torres." His voice was calm, professional, giving nothing away. "Yes, sir." Rebecca stood, acutely aware of every eye in the room on her bare feet. If Daniel noticed anything unusual about her appearance, he didn't show it. "Please, come in." His office was massive, with the same stunning views and minimalist aesthetic as the reception area. One wall was lined with bookshelves, another with awards and photos of Daniel with various dignitaries and celebrities. His desk was organized, but not obsessively so, with a few personal touches that suggested he actually worked here rather than just posed for photo shoots. "Please, sit." Daniel gestured to a leather chair across from his desk. Rebecca sat, tucking her feet under the chair as much as possible. Daniel settled into his own chair and opened a folder that she recognized as her application materials. "I've reviewed your resume," he began. "Impressive academic record. Dean's List all 4 years. Internship with Patterson Associates. Excellent recommendations." He looked up at her. "But I have to ask, Miss Torres." Eyes dropped deliberately to where her feet were poorly hidden under the chair. "Did something happen on your way here this morning?" Rebecca felt her cheeks flush. This was it. The moment where she either told the truth and sounded like she was making excuses, or lied and felt like a fraud. She met his eyes and chose honesty. "Yes, sir. There was an accident on the way here. An elderly woman fell and was injured. I stopped to help until the ambulance came. In the process, I gave her my blazer for comfort, and my shoes were stolen while I was distracted. I considered going home and rescheduling, but I didn't want to miss this opportunity. I apologize for my appearance." Daniel's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. He leaned back in his chair, studying her with an intensity that made her want to squirm. "You gave away your shoes." "Not exactly gave them away, sir. They were taken. But I gave away my blazer." "Yes." "And you came anyway." "Yes, sir." A long silence stretched between them. Rebecca couldn't read his expression. Couldn't tell if he admired her dedication or thought she was crazy for not rescheduling. Finally, Daniel leaned forward, clasping his hands on the desk. "Tell me about your experience at Patterson Associates." The interview lasted 45 minutes, and despite her disheveled appearance, Rebecca found herself falling into a rhythm. Daniel Hoffman asked thoughtful questions that went beyond the standard interview script. He wanted to know how she approached problems, how she handled failure, what she thought about the future of sustainable technology and corporate infrastructure. Rebecca forgot about her bare feet, forgot about the blood on her blouse, forgot about everything except the conversation. She talked about her senior thesis on implementing green solutions in traditional manufacturing, about the lessons she had learned during her internship, about her vision for how businesses could be both profitable and responsible. Daniel listened intently, occasionally making notes, but mostly just watching her with those sharp brown eyes. When she finished explaining her approach to stakeholder management, he set down his pen. "That's a sophisticated understanding for someone just out of school," he said. "Where did you develop that perspective?" Rebecca hesitated, then decided to continue with the honesty that had brought her this far. "My mother cleaned offices for 20 years, sir. She worked in buildings like this one. I saw how decisions made in boardrooms affected people like her. Good decisions meant job security and fair wages. Bad ones meant sudden layoffs and cut benefits. I learned early that business isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about people." Something shifted in Daniel's expression. He stood abruptly and walked to the window, hands in his pockets, looking out at the city below. Rebecca waited, uncertain what she had said wrong. "My father started this company in a garage 40 years ago," Daniel said quietly. He had nothing. Worked 3 jobs to save enough money for materials to build his first prototype. By the time I was 10, we had moved into a real office, but I still remember what it was like before. I remember my mother bringing dinner to the garage because Dad wouldn't stop working long enough to eat." He turned back to face her. "Somewhere along the way, as the company grew, I think we forgot that. We forgot what it means to struggle, to sacrifice, to make hard choices. He returned to his desk, but didn't sit down. Instead, he pressed a button on his phone. "Janet, could you come in for a moment? And bring Amy from HR, please?" Rebecca's stomach dropped. This was it. He was going to have them escort her out diplomatically. She had blown her chance by showing up looking like a disaster. Janet entered, followed by a younger woman with red hair pulled back in a tight bun, carrying a tablet. Both looked at Rebecca with obvious disapproval, barely masked by professional courtesy. "Janet, Amy, Miss Torres, has told me she stopped to help an accident victim on her way here this morning. In the process, she lost her blazer and shoes." Daniel's voice was calm, but carried an edge of authority. "I'd like to verify her story. Can you pull up the traffic camera footage from the intersection of 5th and Marion, approximately 8:30 this morning?" Amy tapped on her tablet, her fingers flying across the screen. "Just a moment, sir. I'll need to access the city traffic monitoring system through our security partnership." Rebecca felt lightheaded. He was checking her story. Of course he was. A CEO didn't get to where he was by taking people at their word. She tried to remember exactly where the accident had happened, praying she had the intersection right. "Here," Amy said, turning the tablet so they could all see. 5th and Marion, 8:32 a.m. The footage was grainy but clear enough. There was Rebecca in her navy suit and heels, walking with purpose. Then Dorothy stumbling off the curb, the groceries flying, the fall. The camera caught Rebecca stopping immediately, running back, kneeling down. The timestamp showed her making the phone call, then the moment she took off her shoes and blazer. "Can you zoom in?" Daniel asked. Amy expanded the image. They watched Rebecca struggle to move Dorothy to the bench, watched her sit with the older woman, watched her applying pressure to the wound. The ambulance arrived at 8:40-7. At 8:50, Rebecca stood up, looked around frantically where her shoes had been, then checked her watch. The camera caught the moment of decision on her face before she turned and started walking quickly toward Hoffman Industries in her stockings. Janet's hand had moved to cover her mouth. Amy looked stricken. Daniel's jaw was tight. "I owe you an apology, Miss Torres," Janet said softly. "I made assumptions." "We all did," Amy added. Daniel turned off the tablet. "Thank you both. That will be all for now." After they left, Daniel sat down heavily in his chair. He was quiet for a long moment, and Rebecca didn't dare break the silence. "That woman you helped," he finally said. "Dorothy. She could have been seriously hurt if you hadn't stopped. Hypothermia, infection from an untreated wound, any number of complications. You were late for the most important interview of your young career, and you stopped anyway. You gave away your shoes and your jacket, knowing you would walk into this building looking unprepared and unprofessional, and you did it anyway." "It was the right thing to do," Rebecca said simply. "Most people don't do the right thing when it costs them something," Daniel replied. "They especially don't do it when the cost might be their future." He pulled out a different folder from his desk drawer. "I've interviewed 8 candidates for this position. All of them had impressive credentials. Most had more experience than you. Every single one of them showed up in perfect interview attire, perfectly prepared, perfectly polished." Rebecca's heart sank. Of course they did. Because they were professionals who hadn't made the foolish choice to help a stranger when they should have been protecting their own interests. "And not one of them," Daniel continued, "demonstrated the kind of character you showed this morning. Do you know what this position entails, Miss Torres?" "Director of Sustainable Operations," Rebecca recited. "Overseeing the implementation of environmentally responsible practices across all company facilities, managing a team of 12, reporting directly to the executive board." "That's the job description," Daniel agreed. "But what the role really requires is someone who can make hard choices. Someone who can see beyond the immediate bottom line to the human impact of our decisions. Someone who will do the right thing even when it's difficult or costly or unpopular." He leaned forward. "Someone who will give away their shoes for a stranger and show up barefoot to the most important interview of their life, because keeping their word matters more than keeping up appearances." Rebecca's breath caught. "Sir? Are you saying I'm saying I'd like to offer you the position, Miss Torres?" Starting salary is $90,000, full benefits, 4 weeks vacation. You'll start in 2 weeks, which should give you time to get settled and purchase appropriate work attire. A small smile crossed his face, including several pairs of good shoes. Rebecca couldn't speak. She felt tears threatening and blinked them back furiously. This couldn't be real. People like her didn't get breaks like this. I don't know what to say, she managed. Say yes, Daniel replied, and then let me tell you the rest. The rest. I'm making some changes to our hiring practices, effective immediately. We're adding a community service component to our evaluation process. We're implementing a program to support employees who need professional clothing for work. And we're establishing the Dorothy Fund, named after the woman you helped this morning, to provide immediate assistance to employees facing unexpected hardship. He stood and extended his hand. You reminded me what this company should stand for. That's worth more than a perfect resume. Rebecca stood on her bare, torn stocking feet and shook his hand. Yes, she said. My answer is yes. 6 months later, Rebecca Torres walked into Hoffman Industries, wearing a sharp gray suit and comfortable heels that she had bought with her first paycheck. The security guard, Mike, greeted her by name and asked about her weekend. The receptionist, Janet, waved cheerfully and handed her a coffee from the shop downstairs, exactly how she liked it. Morning meeting in 20, Janet reminded her. And you have that lunch with the Sustainability Council at noon? Thanks. Janet. Rebecca took the coffee gratefully and headed to the elevator. Her office on the 28th floor was modest compared to the executive suite, but it had a window and enough space for her team to gather comfortably. When she arrived, 3 of her 12 team members were already there, reviewing the quarterly sustainability report that would be presented to the board that afternoon. Morning. Boss, called out James Kim, her second in command. We have good news. The recycling initiative at the Portland facility exceeded targets by 18%. That's fantastic, Rebecca said, settling behind her desk. Did you identify what made the difference? Employee engagement, answered Priya Desai, their data analyst. Turns out, when you actually talk to the people doing the work and implement their suggestions, they buy into the program. Rebecca smiled. It was a lesson she had learned from her mother and had been applying across every facility. Listen to the people closest to the work. Respect their knowledge. Treat them as partners rather than resources to be managed. Her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Can you stop by before the board meeting? Want to discuss something? 20 minutes later, Rebecca knocked on the door to the executive suite. Daniel's assistant waved her through immediately. Inside, she found Daniel at his desk with another man she didn't recognize. Someone in his 60s with kind eyes and a weathered face. Rebecca, come in, Daniel said warmly. I want you to meet someone. This is Thomas Patterson. Rebecca froze. Patterson, as in Patterson Associates, where she had interned. Thomas Patterson was a legend in the industry. One of the pioneers of corporate sustainability practices. Mr. Patterson. It's an honor, she said, shaking his hand. The honor is mine, Thomas replied. Daniel has been telling me about the work you've been doing here. Impressive results in a short time. I have a good team, Rebecca said automatically. A good leader knows to credit their team, Thomas said with a smile. But Daniel also told me about how you got this job. The woman you helped, the shoes you gave away, the interview you showed up to barefoot. Rebecca felt herself blushing. It seems silly now. It's not silly at all, Thomas said. It's the story I've been telling everyone who will listen. Do you know why? She shook her head. Because it reminds us what really matters, Thomas continued. I started my career 50 years ago, convinced that success meant climbing the ladder, making money, building an empire. I did all that. Built a company, sold it for millions, consulted for Fortune 500 companies. But you know what I learned? He didn't wait for an answer. The decisions that mattered most, the ones I'm proudest of now, weren't the ones that made money. They were the ones where I chose people over profit, compassion over convenience, integrity over image. Daniel spoke up. Thomas has agreed to join our advisory board. He'll be helping us expand our sustainability initiatives nationally. But that's not why I asked you here. He pulled out a folder, similar to the one from her interview 6 months ago. we're creating a new position. Chief Impact Officer. Someone who will oversee not just environmental sustainability, but social responsibility across the entire organization. Fair labor practices, community engagement, ethical supply chains, all of it. That sounds amazing, Rebecca said. Do you want my input on candidates? We want you to take the position, Daniel said simply. Rebecca sat down without meaning to. I've only been here 6 months. And in those 6 months, you've reduced our waste output by 22%, improved employee retention by 15%, and somehow managed to make sustainability profitable instead of just a cost center, Daniel replied. More than that, you've changed the culture here. People talk differently about their work now. They care more. The Dorothy Fund you inspired has helped 43 employees through unexpected hardships. The professional clothing program has supported 26 people in getting job-appropriate attire. The community service component and hiring has brought us some of the best talent we've ever seen. You gave away your shoes, Thomas said quietly, and it started a ripple effect. That's real impact, Rebecca. That's the kind of leadership companies need. Rebecca thought about that morning 6 months ago. Standing on the sidewalk, looking at her bare feet, making the choice to walk into that building despite knowing how she looked, she had been terrified. She had been certain she was throwing away her one chance. I almost didn't come in that day, she admitted. I almost went home. But you didn't, Daniel said. You chose courage over comfort. That's what this role requires. Making hard choices. Standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Being willing to sacrifice your own comfort for the greater good. He slid a contract across the desk. $140,000 salary, executive benefits, and a seat at the strategy table. You'll report directly to me and have authority to implement policy changes company-wide. Rebecca picked up the contract with shaking hands. It was more money than she had dreamed of making at this point in her career. More than that, it was the opportunity to make a real difference, to prove that businesses could be both successful and ethical. There's one condition, Daniel added. Her heart sank slightly. Here it came, the catch. You have to promise me something, he continued. Don't lose what makes you special. Don't let success make you forget what it's like to struggle. Don't stop being the person who gives away her shoes. He smiled. We need that person in the executive suite. The world needs that person. Rebecca looked at the contract, then at Daniel and Thomas, then out the window at the Seattle skyline. Somewhere out there, Dorothy was probably at home, her leg healed, telling the story of the young woman who had stopped to help her. Somewhere out there, the next Rebecca was struggling to make ends meet, hoping for a chance, wondering if the world had any place for someone like them. I accept, she said. On one condition of my own. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Go ahead, we establish a scholarship program. Full ride for students from low-income backgrounds who want to study business or environmental science. We recruit from community colleges and state schools, not just the Ivy League. We look for character, not just credentials. Thomas laughed, a deep belly laugh that filled the room. See, this is exactly why you're the right person. Daniel extended his hand. Deal. Draft the proposal, and we'll announce it with your promotion. That afternoon, Rebecca stood before the board of directors and presented the quarterly sustainability report. She wore her gray suit and her comfortable heels. Her hair was pulled back neatly, her shirt was pristine, and she looked every inch the professional executive she had become. But when she spoke, she told them about her mother, who had cleaned their offices. She told them about Dorothy, who had fallen on the street while people walked past. She told them about the 43 employees who had been helped by the Dorothy Fund, and how that investment in people had paid dividends in loyalty, productivity, and innovation. We talk a lot about returns on investment, Rebecca said. But the best returns aren't always measured in dollars. They're measured in lives changed, communities strengthened, and values upheld. 6 months ago, I walked into this building barefoot because I had stopped to help someone in need. I thought I had sacrificed my future for a stranger. Instead, I found a company that valued that choice. That's the kind of company people want to work for. That's the kind of company that will thrive in the long term. The board approved every initiative she proposed. As the meeting ended and people filed out, Daniel caught her arm. "You did good," he said simply. "We did good," Rebecca corrected. "You could have dismissed me as unprepared that day. You could have gone with a safer candidate." "I almost did," Daniel admitted. "When Janet called and told me a candidate had arrived barefoot and disheveled, my first instinct was to cancel the interview. But something made me curious. I wanted to see who would show up in that condition." He smiled. "Best decision I ever made." Rebecca returned to her new office, the one on the 32nd floor with a view that rivaled Daniel's. On her desk was a framed photograph that Janet had pulled from the traffic camera footage and had printed for her. It showed Rebecca kneeling beside Dorothy on the sidewalk, her shoes beside her, completely focused on helping someone she didn't know. Beneath it was a small plaque that Daniel had given her on her first day as Chief Impact Officer. It read, "Character is what you do when no one is watching. Leadership is inspiring others to do the same." Rebecca touched the frame gently. That morning felt like a lifetime ago, and like yesterday, all at once. She had been so scared, so certain she was ruining everything. She couldn't have known that the worst morning of her life would become the best thing that ever happened to her. But more than that, she couldn't have known the ripple effects. The employees helped by the Dorothy Fund, the people hired through the new community service-focused recruitment process,